Imagine waking up one day with the unsettling realization that the life you've been living is not truly your own, that every decision you've made, every belief you hold, and even the desires that drive you may not have originated from the deepest part of who you are, but rather.
I feel like that talks about this is kind of like an early stop here in the first 20 seconds. I wonder if this is going to cue into the fact that when you're living your life, no decision you make prior to the point where you actually have to make the decision at all is free will, because there is no such thing as free will, and everything you've done up to that point has wavered to where that decision was going to be made. Like, let's say I think like chocolate or vanilla ice cream is a good way to put it. When you choose, or when you're asked like, hey, what flavor ice cream do you want, you say chocolate or you say vanilla, every point you have made up until that point has waived that decision to where you would like to choose one or the other. And I feel like that's something that we really can't get away from. There's nothing that we can prove against it either. So
Expectations,
I just wonder if that's what
conditioning,
they're going to get
and
into.
unseen influences of the world around you. Think about it. How much of your identity is a reflection of your authentic self, and how much of it is a carefully constructed mask shaped by external pressures? How often do you feel like you're just playing a role, living according to a script written by society, by your upbringing, or by the fears that whisper in the background of your mind? Today, we embark on an exploration of one of Carl Jung's most
Oh,
profound
they're going into like
insights,
a whole
the
different version
idea
of what
that
I just
life
said.
doesn't truly begin
It's like
until
another
you
phase
find
of it.
yourself. But what does it mean to find yourself? Is it merely about gaining self-awareness, or is there a deeper, more transformative process at play?
I'm sure
Stay
like
with me,
Master Oogway could
because
go into
as
the
we
answer.
uncover the hidden forces that shape your identity, you will come to see why most people never truly find themselves and how you can break free. The final realization we will
Don't know how you
discuss
can break
is the
free.
most powerful of all.
Okay.
It has the potential to shift not only the way you see yourself, but also the very way you engage with the world. Carl Gustav Jung was a pioneer of depth psychology, a thinker who ventured beyond
Depth
traditional
psychology?
theories of the
What's depth
mind
psychology?
to explore the vast hidden realms of the unconscious. Unlike many psychologists of his time, Jung did not believe that mental well-being was simply about adjusting to societal norms. Instead, he saw psychological growth as a journey toward individuation.
Right, because if you're just living your life in order to, like, kind of fit in with society and where all that sits, you're not even really living what your true self would be, and that's why people have such like a broad definition of what authenticity would be. If you're living like what he just said, pretty much when you're living with like a mask like that, especially, and zoom that out. But yeah, when you're living with like a mask, especially, and trying to just fit into the society around you, you're less of what you would have wanted to be in the beginning anyway, and you're less of your authentic self, but you'd fit in better with the people around you. That's why everybody's saying like don't like be expressive, do all that, like put yourself out there. Because when it comes to like either choosing to wear the mask and not be you, or being you but not being accepted by the world, I would say always choose the latter. I'm sure he'll get more into it.
The process of becoming one's most authentic self. But here's the reality. Most people never take that journey. They remain trapped within a version of themselves that has been shaped by external influences. They live according to expectations, never questioning whether the life they lead is truly aligned with who they are.
Well, I mean, if every part of your life is already had planned out for you, why would you even try to make the decision to do something else if it's not for some greater thing? Because like if you let's say you have a job, you have a house, you have a family, you have a decent amount of money, you're just relaxing. Why would you want to stray away from that? I've heard like the brain just doesn't like change, which makes sense because who wants like dramatic change when you're content with your life. But even when it comes to like little stuff like even just slight like life improvements, going to the gym, stuff like that, that takes so much more change. And for people to try to figure out genuinely who they am, that takes so much change that like people specify it as something that would take years, your entire life, which isn't always the case. It kind of depends on like what type of person you are. But when it comes to like I just feel like people make it such a big thing to try to figure out who you are. Like that's your life goal, is to figure out who you are. I just don't think that's the case. I think that's just bullshit.
They seek validation from the outside world, believing that happiness comes from approval, success, or fitting in. Yet, deep down, there is a
Facts.
quiet unrest. an unshakable sense that something is missing. Jung believed that true life begins when we stop running from ourselves. But before we can talk about what it truly means to find yourself, we must first understand what prevents most people from ever doing so. From the moment we enter the world, we are conditioned. We are given names, identities, and predefined roles.
Which goes into what I was
We are
saying in the
taught what
beginning,
is
too.
acceptable and what is not, what is rewarded and what is punished. This process is so subtle and gradual that we rarely question it. We adapt, we conform, and over time we learn to suppress parts of ourselves that don't align with the expectations placed upon us.
And, like, people will stay like that for so long. Like, people will stay in the mentality that, like, everything is set up for you, or, like, the decisions you have made in the past kind of affected your life. Like, let's say, you made one decision, you got a girlfriend. You're, like, it goes upon the same thing, you know? Especially, like, what I was saying in the beginning, where, like, no decision you've ever made is yours. It goes into also play that anything you will do, you probably won't stay away from because you're so comfortable with that reality of it. And then to stray away from that is to stray with like what you're uncomfortable with, which kind of is what he's talking about with like the expectations placed. Because like the various reasons that people would want to stay goes more than just being uncomfortable. But no, you wouldn't want to stray away from that because you have these expectations locked so far into your head that that's just who you are in the end at that point anyway.
Think back to your childhood. Were there moments when you expressed yourself freely, only to be met with disapproval? Perhaps you were told to be realistic, to stop being too sensitive, or that certain emotions and desires were inappropriate.
That all just
Slowly,
depends on how
you
you
learn
grow
to
up
hide
too.
those parts of yourself, to tuck them away where no one could see them. And in doing so, you began to build a mask, what Jung called the persona. The persona is the face we present to the world. It allows us to function in society, to navigate relationships, and to gain acceptance. But
Mm-hmm.
here's the problem. The more we identify with this mask, the more we lose touch with our real selves. We begin to believe that we are the persona, forgetting that there is something deeper beneath it. And then there's the other side of the coin, the shadow. If the persona is what we show the world, the shadow is what we hide from it. It consists of everything we have rejected or suppressed within ourselves, our fears, our unspoken desires, our vulnerabilities, and even our hidden strengths. And here's where it gets even more profound. The shadow doesn't just disappear. It doesn't vanish simply because we refuse to look at it. Instead, it operates beneath the surface, influencing our thoughts, our behaviors, and even our emotional reactions. The parts of ourselves that we reject don't go away. They manifest in unconscious ways, often in the form of projection. Have you ever intensely disliked someone without fully understanding why? Have you ever been triggered by certain behaviors in others that seem to provoke a strong emotional reaction? Jung believed that when we are disturbed by qualities in other people, it is often because those very qualities exist within us, hidden within our own shadow. But what if I told you that within this shadow lies the key to true self-discovery? That the parts of yourself you've suppressed and ignored are not your enemies, but rather the missing pieces of your wholeness. Jung's great insight.
I feel like that's a really good point that he's making there. And that's where like a bunch of the more like borderline bad traits, bad habits, what people would be talking about normally would be. When they're talking about this and saying like, have you ever disliked somebody? That can go the same with just liking somebody overall. Like let's say there's someone better than you. Let's say you have like a job position. There's someone above you that you really like. You want that job position, but you're liking the person specifically because they have that job position. It kind of goes in the same thing. It's more of self-reflection and to kind of treat most people as a mirror because what you put out is what you're going to get back. And like that goes into like a bunch of other like religious like bullshit that people talk about. When people say like to see how you're like talking to others and stuff is how you would like it just mirrors back to what you would want. If you're treating someone like shit, chances are there's it for a reason. There's like if you pay attention to most things day to day, you'll find that there's a reason for mostly everything. And that's why you're always supposed to watch out for your surroundings, kind of pay attention to everything. Not in the sense of like be hyper aware, but be hyper aware of how you're perceiving that thing.
Was this. Psychological growth is not about eliminating the shadow. It is about integrating it. It is about looking into the depths of your own unconscious and facing what you have denied. Because when you do, you unlock a profound source of personal power, authenticity, and freedom. This is where the real journey begins. Are you ready to confront the truth of who you are? To break free from the illusions that have shaped you? Because what comes next will challenge everything you thought you knew about yourself, and it will open the door to a life that is truly yours. Most people go through life believing that they already know who they are. They define themselves by their name, their job, their culture, their past experiences. But what if I told you that your
That's
identity
just
is
the
far more
mask in
complex
general.
than you realize? That the self you believe yourself to be is just a surface-level construct, a fraction of a much deeper, more profound reality. Carl Jung believed that within every individual there exists a hidden world, a vast and intricate inner landscape filled with forgotten memories, suppressed emotions, unacknowledged desires, and untapped potential. And the key to truly finding yourself is not in constructing a new identity, but in uncovering what has been buried within you. Let's take a moment to reflect. Have you ever felt a deep, unexplainable longing for something more? A sense that there is a greater version of yourself waiting to emerge? This is not just imagination, it is the voice of your unconscious mind calling you to something greater. Jung referred to this process as individuation. He believed that true fulfillment comes not from conforming to external expectations, but from integrating all aspects of ourselves, the good, the bad, the light, and the dark. But before we can integrate these parts, we must first confront them. And this is where most people stop. Why? Because facing yourself is uncomfortable. It requires looking at aspects of your personality that you have long ignored. It demands that you question long-held beliefs, challenge your fears, and confront the inner conflicts that have shaped your life.
I feel like that's such a significant thing to be able to do something like that. Like another thing he's trying to go into is more of just don't lie to yourself, which is in and of itself a really hard thing to do because once you realize how much you lie to yourself, like you'll either like one, you'll try to stop and then you just won't because you'll just ignore it after a certain point in time and you'll start lying to yourself again. Uh, no, it's a philosophy video by Carl Jung. The life begins when you find yourself. But yeah, like I was saying, a lot of what he's saying is like don't lie to yourself. When you realize how much you're lying to yourself, you'll either one go back, or you'll continue just to try to not lie to yourself, and then there'll be like continuous improvement from there. But I feel like a lot of what he's describing, most people don't want to do when it comes to trying to step out of like comfort zone bounds as well. And that's something like a lot smaller than what he's talking about. A lot of this takes a lot of time because there's some things that you'd have to think about that you wouldn't even know about. Like even in my day-to-day life, I would think I have it mostly set up on like cuz you'll watch a few philosophy videos. You'll be thinking for like weeks, maybe a few months, right? And you'll think you kind of have it figured out on where your life is going, or you'll have the knowledge to be able to know that there's more after this point of like having already thought about stuff like this. But I feel like it's not as simple, and I feel like that's the part where it goes to where they say, "Oh, this takes years," because there's still things you're gonna keep finding out about yourself, even if you've already experienced everything in life. The things in and of yourself are so complicated and deep that you won't even know. You won't even think about them.
Think about it. How often do we avoid silence? How often do we distract ourselves with work, social media, entertainment, or anything that keeps us from sitting alone with our thoughts? This constant distraction is not accidental. It is a defense mechanism, a way of avoiding the deeper questions that linger beneath the surface. But no matter how much we try to avoid them, these hidden aspects of ourselves do not go away. They show up in unexpected ways, through anxiety, self-sabotage, unfulfilling relationships, or a persistent feeling of being lost. Jung believed that our unconscious mind is always speaking to us, but we have learned to ignore its messages. However, if we start paying attention, we begin to see patterns. We begin to notice how our deepest wounds influence our choices, how our suppressed desires shape our behaviors, and how the things we fear most often hold the greatest lessons. Let's consider a simple yet powerful example: fear of rejection. Many people go through life terrified of being judged or abandoned. They seek approval, avoid conflict, and suppress their true thoughts to maintain harmony. But where does this fear come from? Is it really about the opinions of others, or does it stem from something deeper? Perhaps an old wound, an experience from childhood, a moment when they felt unseen or unworthy. Jung would argue that this fear is not just an emotion, it is a shadow aspect of the self that has not been fully acknowledged. And until it is brought into the light, it will continue to control one's actions from behind the scenes. But here's the incredible thing. When we finally face these hidden parts of ourselves, they lose their power over us. Imagine for a moment what it would feel like to live without fear of judgment, to speak your truth without hesitation, to make decisions not based on what others expect, but on what resonates deeply within you. This is the power of individuation. It is not about becoming someone new, it is about becoming more of who you truly are. But how do we begin? How do we uncover the unconscious forces that shape our lives? Jung believed that one of the most powerful ways to access the unconscious is through symbols, dreams, and introspection. He saw dreams as messages from the deeper self, revealing hidden truths about our psyche. He also emphasized the importance of creative expression, art, writing, music, and other forms of self-exploration as ways of accessing and integrating the unconscious mind. But perhaps the most important step is simply this: awareness. The moment you begin to question your thoughts, your reactions, and your deeply held beliefs, you are already taking the first steps toward transformation.
I feel like that makes a good point. A lot of when you live your life knowing the fact that most people are watching you, which is a lie, they're not. Nobody's watching you. Not in the sense that they don't care, but also in the sense they just don't care. A lot of people are so focused on their own, like, lives and their own, like, they're locked into their own problems. Why would they care about you? I heard of something, it's called, like, the spotlight syndrome, where it's people, like, especially, like, let's say you spill something in your shirt. It's a good example. When you're, like, walking through a hall, you're gonna think, oh god, everybody knows I spilled something on my shirt. Nobody cares. Nobody's gonna know unless you point it out. But when you go into, like, more of a society or, like, a group area where there's a bunch of people, you're gonna automatically, just in your head, know that most people are probably gonna be watching you. It's not the case, but that's what you think, and it's hard to stop that. And you'll limit yourself from experiencing a lot of stuff based off of that factor. And what he says, like, when you begin to start, like, questioning yourself, you're already, like, 1 point away from transformation. Is when you go out in public and you think someone's gonna judge me for something, just either do it anyway, or when you think about it, take some more self-reflection past that point. Because not everybody's watching you, right? But they can't help the fact to think about that. Just do it anyway. Experience. Who cares what that other person thinks? They don't know you. Chances are, 15 minutes later, they won't even remember you. That's how significant in such a little time it is for them to actually be able to, like be eyeing you or something, Unless you're a more significant person, obviously.
The moment you stop running from discomfort and start facing it with curiosity, you begin to reclaim your true self. Because here's the truth. Most people live their entire lives as strangers to themselves. They follow the paths laid out for them, never realizing that they have the power to choose something different. They suppress their true nature, never realizing that their greatest strength lies in embracing all that they are. But you don't have to be one of those people. You have the power to break free from the illusions that have held you back, to shed the layers of conditioning and fear that have kept you from experiencing
They really
life
spice up
fully,
the words, but it
to step
essentially
into
is
the
just what I
fullness of
just
who you
said
are,
anyway.
unafraid and unapologetic. And in the next part, we are going to explore something even more profound: the hidden archetypes within you. These ancient patterns, buried deep in your psyche, hold the key to unlocking your greatest potential.
I feel
What
like
you are about
archetypes
to
are a
learn
very
may
strange
change the way you
topic.
see yourself forever. If the journey to finding yourself were as simple as making a decision, everyone would already be living in complete alignment with their true nature. But as we've seen, the process is far more complex. It is not just about choosing who we want to be, it is about uncovering the forces that have shaped us, facing the parts of ourselves we have rejected, and integrating them into a whole, authentic identity. But here's a question. Why do we feel drawn to certain behaviors, desires, or fears? Why do we repeat the same mistakes or fall into the same patterns even when we try to change? Carl Jung's answer was revolutionary. He believed that within every human being there exist universal patterns, deep-rooted psychological blueprints that influence our thoughts, emotions, and behaviors in ways we often do not fully understand. He called these patterns archetypes. Jung argued that archetypes are ancient, collective images stored in what he called the collective unconscious, a level of the psyche shared by all human beings, inherited from the experiences of our ancestors. These archetypes shape our personal identity, our relationships, and even the way we perceive the world. Think about the stories that have been told throughout history: the hero's journey, the wise mentor, the shadowy villain, the innocent child. These characters appear in myths.
I honestly don't know how much I believe in like archetypes in and of itself. I feel like it's a very strange concept, and it's more of just discussing patterns throughout history, which people already know. History is bound to repeat itself. There's so much things that happen in such a short amount of time that for things of similar events to not kind of be like close aligned, it's a very hard thing to have happen. It's more common for things to be repeating themselves than it is for them to not. And what like you even like think about, okay, like let's say you're on a schedule. Okay, you have certain hours to which you're doing certain things. Other people also have probably that similar schedule. They're gonna be repeating. People are gonna go in the same area at the same times. People are gonna be going to do different things at different times. Hell, take holidays for example. You know, Christmas. A lot of people are going back to their family. They'll be probably going most the same way depending on what region you're from. So there'll be heavier traffic for certain areas, more people going to certain businesses at certain times, stuff like that. When it comes to history, it's more of just a broader field of what that would be. And I would say, oh, thank you for the volume. Um, God, I lost my train of thought. But basic patterns and stuff of like archetypes, I would say just more similar things have happened consistently than they have not. And I don't think people talk about just the overall patterns and how crazy it is of how many we actually have compared to, oh yeah, it's gonna be an archetype. It's rooted deep within you. No, it's not. It's probably not. Not gonna lie. It's probably more of just similar things have happened. Like if you're always looking for patterns, you're bound to find them, regardless of like any outside factor. If you're looking for something, you're gonna find it. Patterns specifically. Archetypes are just one of those things that have happened to come out of that.
Religions, literature, and even in our dreams. They are not just fictional. They represent psychological forces that exist within all of us. And whether we realize it or not, these archetypes are constantly at play in our lives. For example, consider the hero archetype. This is the part of you that longs for purpose, that feels called to something greater. It is the part of you
So it'd
that
be like
seeks
the
to overcome
philosopher archetype.
obstacles, grow stronger, and achieve a higher version of yourself. But this archetype does not exist in isolation. It is always accompanied by the shadow. The shadow, as we discussed earlier, represents the repressed and hidden aspects of the self. It is the part of you that contains your fears, your weaknesses, and even your untapped potential. In myths, the hero must confront the shadow, often symbolized as a monster, an enemy, or a great challenge, before they can truly evolve. Now, let's bring this into real life. Have you ever had a moment when you knew you needed to change, but something inside you resisted? A time when you had the opportunity to step into a greater version of yourself, but fear, doubt, or self-sabotage held you back. This is the battle between the hero and the shadow playing out within you. The
I
mistake
place
most
those
people
under bad
make is trying to
habits,
suppress the
depending on the
shadow instead of
individual.
understanding it. But Jung believed that true transformation happens when we integrate the shadow, not by rejecting it, but by learning from it. Let's say you struggle with self-doubt. Instead of ignoring it or pretending it doesn't exist, Jung would encourage you to ask, where does this self-doubt come from? Is it truly yours, or was it planted in you by past experiences, societal expectations?
Okay, so I like this version of how they talk about it compared to like other versions only because when they're talking about it, they don't talk about it as if it's just bad habits that is like that's trying to hold you back from something greater because I think that's stupid. Having like a certain archetype of a thing or like certain different personality things that would be like, oh yeah, self-doubt, you need to do all this with this because of this archetype. Obviously, that's stupid. I hate that. When they're talking about, okay, you have a set ideal of where you want to be. Okay, let's say you're up here. your self-doubt takes you from up here to down here. Instead of it being like, oh yeah, kind of try to place yourself into a better position or try to like get better understanding from it. They're saying take that self-doubt, hyper analyze it so you don't have it going forward, or you have a better understanding of how to counter it with, you'll have like a different strategy for it. You'll improve yourself better off of it. Stuff like that. I like how they're talking about it compared to just say other like philosophy videos that you'll see on the internet.
Expectations or the voices of others? What lessons does it hold? Could it be that within your doubt there is actually a hidden strength, such as humility, introspection, or the ability to see things from multiple perspectives? When we begin to see our struggles not as weaknesses, but as messages, from the unconscious, everything changes. But archetypes go beyond just the hero and the shadow. There are many other forces within us, each with its own role in shaping our identity. One of the most powerful is the anima and animus archetype. Jung believed that within every man there exists a hidden feminine side, the anima, and within every woman there exists a hidden masculine side, the
Right.
animus. These are not about gender in the physical
I
sense,
agree with that as well.
but about the balance of energies within us. The anima represents intuition, emotion, creativity, and deep connection with the unconscious.
I don't believe that there's more of okay. So I agree, but I also disagree. Only because when they talk about like anima, that certain archetype within men, there's a feminine side, and within females, there's a masculine side. I don't believe that that's a major thing that we can change, or if that's like a certain archetype. I believe more of there's certain patterns that we have set up in our society as people that make it to where we perceive that some things females do are masculine, some things men do are feminine. Let's say like crying, for example. There's a major time and it's kind of dwindled away now, especially in recent times. But when people talk about like let's say men crying, that's a feminine thing. Men aren't supposed to cry; they're supposed to be tough. But that's not necessarily the case either. Same thing for like females wanting to do like blue collar jobs. You know, there's nothing saying that women are just innately more masculine than like they shouldn't just be doing that. There's nothing cosmically proving that we are not bound to a certain thing. And I feel like placing that in and of itself would make it more seem like an archetype, and I can kind of agree when you come to that sense, but just in general, no, I don't believe that. I feel like it's just something that we as humans have just placed upon it and labeled that as it.
The animus represents logic, structure, discipline, and assertiveness. When these two forces are in balance, a person feels whole, but when they are out of balance, inner conflict arises. For example, a man who rejects his anima may struggle with expressing emotions, fearing vulnerability as a weakness. A woman who rejects her animus may struggle with asserting herself, feeling hesitant to take control of her own life. But when these energies are embraced rather than suppressed, they become a source of immense strength. And this leads us to one of the most important truths Jung discovered. To find yourself, you must embrace all parts of yourself, the light and the dark, the masculine and the feminine, the known and the unknown. Individuation is not about becoming something different. It is about becoming whole. But there is one final piece to this puzzle, one last revelation that ties everything together, and it is perhaps the most powerful of all. Because the greatest obstacle to finding yourself is not just fear, or self-doubt, or external conditioning. It is something far deeper, something hidden in the very fabric of how we perceive reality itself. And in the next part, we are going to uncover it. What you are about to hear will challenge everything you thought you knew about yourself, and it may just change your life forever. Throughout this journey, we have explored the hidden forces shaping your identity, the masks you wear, the shadow you suppress, and the archetypes influencing your thoughts and behaviors. But now we must confront the deepest illusion of all, the illusion of self. You see, most people go through life assuming that their identity is fixed, that they are a single, unchanging self that moves through time, shaped by memories and experiences. But Jung, along with many great philosophers and mystics, understood something radical. The self is not a static entity, it is fluid, ever-changing, and far greater than we have been led to believe. What if the version of you that you identify with right now is only a fragment of something much larger? What if the person you think you are is just one expression of a limitless consciousness that has been evolving for centuries, across lifetimes, through inherited wisdom and experience. Jung explored this idea through the concept of the self, not the small ego-driven self that clings to labels and fears, but the true self, the totality of who you are beyond the illusions of identity. And this realization is both liberating and terrifying, because it means that everything you have believed yourself to be, all the fears, the limitations, the stories you tell yourself, is not the full truth. It is merely a construct, a temporary framework built by the mind. And here's the most powerful truth of all. You are not just a single, isolated being moving through life. You are a vast, interconnected field of consciousness, carrying within you the wisdom of generations, the depth of the unconscious, and the potential for transformation that is beyond imagination. But if this is true, then why do we feel so limited?
Uh, I feel like that's more of a complicated one. I feel like he was just re-emphasizing the point he had made in the beginning, which is fine. But I feel like the way he's I feel like the way he says most of these things is like more it's like you could put it in like plain like dictionary terms, but he's taking it and just like bringing it all the way up. I think it's giving it just more of a different way to think about it for people with more of like a philosophical mindset because or like I would say like an analytical type mind. You know, like you're more trying to find the reason whys of things rather than like just the blatant answers. So it gives you more something to think about, but not direct answers for certain things that have happened that we know of as humans. But he's trying to talk about like the sense of self, and I feel like the sense of self is such a complicated and broad term. You're better off trying to figure out what makes up you as a person rather than your sense of self. Because when he's sitting there talking about you as a person are a accumulation of consciousness that has generational knowledge, right? That's first off, that's a lot. Second off, what? Like, okay, yes, I guess you're right. Us as people, we've evolved from like generations upon generations since the Earth and the universe was born. That's how we're here. That's how you guys are all here. But I feel like when people talk about that, they talk about it in such a broad term. I'm gonna try to specify it. When we think of our sense of self, you're better off figuring out what makes up you rather than what he said. What he's talking about is you as a person have evolved from generations upon generations of different organisms, and now you in and of yourself know more than any one of your lineage before you. And that's just because of the time period that you're in, and then, like the stage of evolution that you were born into.
Why do we experience suffering, doubt, and fear? The answer lies in the ego. The ego is not the enemy. It is simply the part of the mind that creates a sense of separation. That is the voice in your head that says, this is who I am and this is who I am not. It builds walls, defines borders,
I feel like
and
ego
keeps you
also has a
tethered to
weird
familiar
term.
patterns. And while the ego
That's given
serves
such
a
a bad
purpose,
name.
it is also the greatest obstacle to self-discovery. Because in truth, you are not limited to a single identity. You are a being in constant evolution. And the moment you stop clinging to the idea of who you think you are, you unlock infinite possibilities. But how do you do this? How do you step beyond the illusion of self
That's
and
just
into
being
the fullness
adaptive.
of your existence?
Just as a person, be
Jung
an
offered a
adaptive
path,
person.
one that requires courage, deep introspection, and a willingness to surrender everything you thought you knew about yourself. First, embrace the unknown. Most people fear the unknown because it represents uncertainty, but the unknown is where growth happens. It is where transformation occurs. When you stop resisting the mysteries within you and instead lean into them with curiosity, you begin to see the world and yourself with new eyes. Second, release attachment to labels. You are not just your name. You are not just your job, your past, or your personality. You are something far beyond definition. When you let go of rigid identities, you create space for something greater to emerge. Third, listen to the unconscious. Your dreams, your instincts, your deep intuitions, they are not random. They are messages from the self guiding you toward wholeness. The more you tune in, the more you will begin to recognize patterns, synchronicities, and signs that lead you toward your true path. And finally, surrender to the process. Finding yourself is not a destination. It is not something you achieve and then forget about. It is an ongoing journey, an unfolding of deeper and deeper layers of truth. And here's the ultimate revelation. You were never truly lost. You have always been here. The self you have been seeking has been within you all along, waiting to be remembered. So now, the choice is yours. Will you continue living as a fragment of who you truly are, bound by...
I feel like you should treat it as a journey. Nothing's set in stone. The only point out of life is, yeah, like they say, trying to figure out who you are. But I feel like that, like I said, it has a broad term.